My name is Phil Davies. I'm CTO of Secrutiny, and yes, perhaps it is a little bit shocking that we're giving some advice and some suggestions on how not to spend money with security vendors. But it is the silly season, so that sort of makes sense, really, doesn't it? And I've dressed appropriately for the day. I'm looking forward to spending a bit of time with you, walking through some of the things that I've used or are beginning to use now that I feel have been significantly beneficial to either get me out of the hole or to help with some of these edge cases, or in some cases use it more determinedly in a production sense. So without further ado, assuming that you can see my screen okay, I'm going to carry on. So there we go. What company, I'm going to start with a question, but it's a rhetorical one. What company has an unlimited security budget? Okay, so we all realize, whether we're enterprises, small, medium firms, organizations alike, we've all got those same needs. We all have to meet our security expectations. We have to answer the questions from our senior leadership team to demonstrate and prove that we are secure, that we've put the right tools and implemented the right processes to secure our organizations. And there's not an organization that wouldn't prefer to be able to spend more money if they could. But sometimes that right budget isn't available. It's not available right now because the new budget year hasn't started, or in that line item you don't have anything spare, and it's difficult to move money from one line item to another. Or what you might find is that you've got a part of your organization that's only just joined you. Let's just say you've made a merger or an acquisition, and the budget doesn't extend to cover that particular part. So we all have those times where a little bit extra or a bit of a leg up would significantly help. And actually, I really want to stress the point that when we're talking about open source and community-driven projects and and the tooling that accompanies that, free doesn't have to mean cheap. Some of the most useful tools that I've encountered have been free or low cost. Years before it was really popular, I used Splunk when it was first, when it hadn't been out for very long. And you've always had that capability of installing a local version of Splunk and using it to index data of many different types. And there was a particular security incident I was responding to that had a large amount of fairly strangely structured data. And knowing that I could spin up Splunk really rapidly, index that data, and then carve it and analyze it in a hurry, was something that was a significant lifesaver for me in a very time-sensitive situation. So the sorts of analysis that I was able to do with that would have taken 6 people a day of work to do, and that's the kind of value benefit that I think that really exemplifies what free and open source means to me. Similarly, before Nipper, which was from a company called Titania, came along, which is a firewall configuration analysis tool. It had become closed source recently, but before it became closed source, it was out and out the best way to validate the configuration for Cisco and Checkpoint firewalls, and it can really very prettily describe exactly where you need to make improvements. And that's the sort of thing that even when it became closed source, it was never very expensive, and in some cases gave you more of a bang for your buck than some of the really highest expense solutions in that space, things like Skybox, or AlgoSec if you want the enterprise license version of it. So I think the challenge with free and open source technology is one of popularity. And when we're talking about Nipper and Splunk, I think the more valuable they are, the more that people want to take advantage of them, and you can recognise and understand that the developers behind that, wouldn't mind some kind of reward and contribution for the effort, for the research and development that they've had to put in for it. So whilst not everyone is out to make a buck from the software that they have, it is hard to blame people for selling their technology to a bidder, or closing the source down to encourage a little bit more revenue generation, which ultimately should be going into an improved product set. I guess sometimes that doesn't always work, and if Dr. Seuss says business is business and business must grow, the challenge with these open source acquisitions, where they're purchased by some of the larger security vendors, is that the original purpose and that really high value, high concentrated value tends to get a little bit lost. And I guess that's my only sadness, I suppose, in the way that these solutions tend to get acquired, is that it becomes increasingly difficult to reach that and pay for just a little bit that you wanted, that was actually the total value that you wanted to get out of the solution. All of the extra stuff that it's being worked into is nice, but it's not what you needed in the first place, and that makes it difficult. So we recognise that budgets are never unlimited, and we recognise actually that there are very few organisations that don't have kind of satellite parts of their environment, either geographically or from a business line point of view. There are pieces where you'll have made a significant technology investment decision for a piece of security tooling, but it doesn't reach either that technology type, or it doesn't reach outside the confines of your WAN. It doesn't reach against the remote access capability of your centralized staff, and so you need something else that will help you close that coverage loop, and that's another really good reason why open source tooling is useful and not something to be sniffed at across the security investment landscape. And then the last thing on this particular point is that there are always bits of technology that don't get covered by those mainstream pieces. So you might have deployed an EDR solution, but it doesn't solve some of the things that you need to examine from an OT point of view, or from an exotic operating system, exotic technology environment point of view. And sometimes you need something else that will help you in that space. So that's in the round. That's why I would consider it's really important to always keep some things in your back pocket that might help you perform the same testing role that you can do with your other solutions, but keep them for these edge cases. And clearly, if you're a small organization, these might be all you need. So without further ado, there's a slightly longer introduction. I'll start going into some of the tooling, which is probably why everyone's here. So probably the most recent thing I have seen, and it's an edge case when we're talking about testing tools, but if you consider it as testing what you understand to be your external threats, and which ones are relevant to you and the organization style that you are, then you could consider TrueKnow as being a really interesting thing to look at. So this is a web-based portal, and it allows you to understand what of the most recent breaches that have occurred, that have been collected together, what parts of the MITRE ATT&CK framework have been used in those, and which ones then, based on your industry, are relevant to you and things that you need to take into account. So whilst it isn't directly allowing you to perform the tests, what it is allowing you to do is to establish a mechanism for threat hunting and for validating some hypotheses in your environments. And there are other tools coming up that will help you take that to the next step. But Manish has really, the chap behind this particular solution has really hit the nail on the head with respect to the, a niche in the market at the moment, and that is that lots of the incidents that you hear about have the companies that are reporting these incidents can only really talk about the incidents that they've seen, and that they've responded to, and clearly there's a lot of sensitivity about what actually happened. So having an opportunity to see some of this, even if it's not globally representative of all the incidents that take place, does give you a really interesting insight into the kind of mechanisms and the ways by which attackers are succeeding at the moment, but more so than ever before in achieving their objectives. If you need to focus on a particular part of the MITRE framework and you're interested in what it would mean to you in terms of your ability to mitigate a potential incident, then I would recommend having a look at TrueKnow. And there is like any good thing, there's a free element to that, and then there's also a paid element that gives you a little bit more access. So have a look at that. Make friends with Manish on LinkedIn. He's very chatty, and if you need his details, he's always happy to chat. He's come out of stealth now, and it's a really exciting product. The second one is a bit of an old favourite for me. So I guess I've made use of OWASP, Z-Attack Proxy, and also Burp Suite from Portswigger for about 13 years now, one way or another. And it's not something that I dip into every day now. It'd be pretty unusual. But I've got the utmost respect for all of the people in the OWASP community who have put time into building something that allows you to structure tests for web applications and sites that you manage, so that you can get a representative view of and perhaps revalidate vulnerability findings that you might have received from paid-for vendors. So if you pay for an external vendor review, what I've tended to find is that there is a lot of to and fro with the OWASP top 10. A scanning vendor externally can come up with a significant number of vulnerabilities of one style, like cross-site scripting, and you can do all the work you like in the background to convince the developers and infrastructure teams to make the right changes to mitigate those vulnerabilities. But what you find is that next month they're back again with because you're only fixing the symptom rather than the problem. If you want to try and get on top of that and actually prove that there are not multiple different mechanisms that could be applied before you go back and pay for the next set of tests to be done, then using something like OWASP, Z-Attack Proxy, and Burp Suite can be a really good way of proving and then demonstrating back to your developer community that they've fixed that symptom, but they haven't fixed the problem. And I guess what that does is save you from spending additional money on retests that may not be required, because you've reinvested that on the retest sort of cycle internally. Now, modern browsers have all got a developer mode, and actually you can explore and manage a lot of the content, and many of them will now explain some of the security findings that they're seeing in a live concept. But actually, there's still a really good value point for having a true customer experience at your browser level, and then having an intermediate or man-in-the-middle proxy that's performing that testing function for you. Having that separation can give you a better set of results and a more representative sort of sample. I guess the challenge with OWASP Z-Attack Proxy is that in the past, perhaps some poor pen test outfits have made use of this and similar automated scanning tools, and it's gotten a bit of a bad reputation for being used as a kind of a fire and forget web vulnerability assessment suite. And it's, it can be so much more than that if you're prepared to invest the time. So have a look at that. Have a look at Burp Suite 2 and see if that will fix some of your application security testing challenges. I did mention when we were talking about TrueKnow that it can help once you've understood that you've got a threat hunting hypothesis in mind, something that you want to go and look for in your environment, that we would mention some other tooling that would support that. So I've mentioned it before, I'll mention it again now. I really like this book, The Practical Threat Intelligence and Data-Driven Threat Hunting. And inside here, there's a chapter on how to build your own threat hunting framework. And it is all open source within this book. And so it is all accessible to everybody who wants to have a go. And that could be anyone who's just starting out, as in an engineering function, through to CISOs of small, medium organizations who want to get a better understanding of what that workflow is like. I think so many people have got different opinions of what threat intelligence is as a discipline. And I think this book and making use of things like the hunting ELK framework is a good way to get that started. So what this is basically doing, if you want to download and implement this, is you create a Ubuntu box in your environment, and then it installs a number of Docker images, of Docker containers, that link all of these capabilities together to allow you to ingest information, perform the analysis, grab external threat information, test your hypothesis, and then manage the outcome from that. That might be either attack surface reduction briefs to your team, or attack mitigation changes that you might need to make to your protect function within your security team. So do have a look at HELK or the hunting ELK, and it's not for the faint-hearted. Don't start it one beer down on a Friday night, because it will demand quite a bit of attention to get the most out of it. But what's amazing to me is that someone's being prepared to put all of that together and keep it alive and keep improving it. It's still alpha, I think, just now, or just coming out of alpha. But get on that, get on the back of that and see how you can make use of it in your environment, even if it's for a small part of your SOC. Or if you've got an outsourced SOC, you might want to maybe examine how you can take a bit more charge of what it is that you care about and what your SOC cares about. So have a look at that. I'd be interested if anyone wants to have a go at that and build some kind of community to support other people who are trying it out. I think that would be quite a nice thing to do on LinkedIn with the team here.
Phil, just can you name that book again from the?
Yes, of course. Yeah, sorry. Can you see it on my? Maybe you can't see because I'm sharing my screen. It's called Practical Threat Intelligence and Data-Driven Threat Hunting. Okay, and the author is Valentina Palasin. I don't have access to chat just now because I've got my PowerPoint presenting.
That's fine. I've got it here. I'll put a link to it in the chat.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
It's a really good book. It's only been out since January, and there aren't too many new cyber books coming out that I would instantly recommend. But I do really like this one. Okay, this one, GAUNTLT. I was at a seminar session at RSA in San Francisco in 2017, I think it was, and I first heard about automating the process of testing web applications at the point that they're ready to be built and go live. So using the true DevOps CI/CD pipeline methodology, it's really easy to understand that it's difficult. It's really easy to understand how difficult it is to risk assess new releases of code at the frequency with which people wish to deploy them, you know, and it's the most poignant sort of evidence or experience that you've got that risk professionals can't get their arms around every new release and perform that same triage questionnaire and change assurance function that they'd like to. So you know, I guess what I'd heard was Rich Mogul from Securiosis talking about a model where you can build the security characteristics and the security validation into the implementation of your CI/CD pipeline. And you know, clearly this has moved on a lot with containerization and with, you know, service meshes and the capability to validate binaries more uniformly when you're building them, you know, with a better set of technology. But back then in 2017, this was a little bit more straightforward. And you know, Rich Mogul had a Ruby script where he was able to press a button, and he described all the things that after he pressed this button that his Ruby script did, you know. And what happened was that, you know, he clicked the button, a new code deployment was uploaded and initiated. It built all of the servers and the application packages behind the scenes. It assigned them to the correct networks, so that, you know, the web portions of that to the right subnet, the application servers to the right subnet, the data store solutions to the right subnets. It gave them the correct names. It applied the certificates to the front of the web pages. Managed the DNS entries behind the scenes. It built a web application firewall context, put it in front of that, and then it ran a security test on it using GAUNTLT, and then validated all of that. And once that was all complete, made it ready for go live, you know. And I remember just being completely blown away by that, how you could take something that was historically a real pain in the neck to be comfortable that you're ready to go for a new release, and turn that into something that took, you know, a minute or two in total to complete. So it was totally awesome back then. Gauntlet.org was one of the pieces of technology used, as I say, at the time. And you know, whilst there are improvements in runtime application security protection, there is still a benefit in integrating tests that prove that the basic or foundation security characteristics in a piece of web code are ready and are present at each iteration. And so what Gauntlet allows you to do is to define, you know, within your code a language and a set of constructs that you can then validate at any opportunity, really. You could be testing that once a day or once an hour or every time you do a release. And it gives you a report then of which of those security constructs are still valid. And so rather than you know, taking an interview and observation-based approach, you get factual data, which, you know, in a time of where human involvement is really difficult to maintain, actually audit personnel and, you know, and your own peace of mind is proven better with some automated tests that have a factual and material outcome. So have a look at Gauntlet and see what you go. It's getting a bit long in the tooth now, but you know, there are similar solutions out there which also are open source and available. Another one that's been around for a while and has changed its name, well, let's just say regularly for now, is OpenVAS and the Greenbone vulnerability management platform. So, you know, in the introduction slide, I was describing how there are different parts of your organization that may not be reachable by your traditional vulnerability scanning framework. Or it may be that the organization's too small to buy one of the larger enterprise grade solutions, and you just need to do some vulnerability validation tests across a small part, a small corpus of IPs. So you can, there are lots of tools available, but you can make use of OpenVAS and the vulnerability management framework from Greenbone to create a scanning and reporting function that is, I guess, if you've got so many different vulnerability solutions elsewhere in your environment, that's like having the right knife for the right piece of kitchen task that you're doing. But think of OpenVAS as a penknife. It's something that you have out in the field with you, that it's not perfect at any one job, but it's very good at giving you a baseline level of confidence that you've performed a scan. You've got a basic understanding of what is vulnerable, and because it is supported by community submissions, it's up to date, and it gives good subscription to new vulnerabilities that are coming online. So I think I would certainly recommend this one. It is, if you start on the web page, not the one that's just down here, but on the Greenbone front page, you'll find it quite difficult, I think, to discern where the open source part of that is, and it's a little bit sad. But if you do look at YouTube, you will find that there are a number of individuals who have mapped out a tutorial of how to get that working in its open source mechanism, and that does look like it would be worth some further investigation for organisations that would make use of it. So moving on, what top 10 testing list would not be complete without have I been pwned? I suppose this one for me is a little bit like eating Tang Fastics, those sweets with a very sort of bitter outside. I never enjoy the experience. It's a bit like logging on to HMRC and working out how much tax you might owe. You kind of you type everything in, and then you hold your breath and you look away while you press the enter button, and then the results come back. I think that the good news is, from this is that it's going to give you some representative sample. The bad news is that I guess there are very few people who come up empty on this solution now. Just about everyone, because of the number of organizations and the size of the organizations that have been breached, have got one or more entries in this list. And I think the security awareness message here is to continue to encourage people to keep their work lives and their personal lives separate, and never to use the same passwords for each, because if it's not happened now, you're one of the lucky ones. It is just a matter of time, and the chances are that it just hasn't been uploaded onto the site. So it's not going to tell you very much in a security incident, but what it can do is allow you to go there on a relatively regular basis with a set of VIP email addresses and see what has changed. And maybe using that change, that delta, is something that will give you a better dialogue with your leadership team about their hygiene for the way they manage their email addresses. SSL Labs is something that I guess lots and lots of organizations have used. It's still amazing that this is free, right? Every organization I've worked with in the last sort of 10, 15, 20 years has made use of this at some point, one time or another. And I think, whilst PKI itself as a discipline for web-based certificate management continues to be challenged by trust issues with different certificate authorities and intermediaries, nonetheless, it can really help organizations avoid these kind of costly and embarrassing mistakes about certificates that have expired, or certificates that weren't built properly, or certificates that have been used for the wrong purpose. It just makes sense to make this part of the standard offering. And whilst you may be able to draw down your certificates and have those managed by a content delivery network like Akamai or AWS now, it's still useful just to prove that everything is in order and that you've got the right chain set up. And I think that the nice thing is that you can invite your customers as part of their their own validation. If you're required to answer some validation questions for them, you can give them some evidence that they can see for themselves. So that's quite useful from that perspective. I guess, on the right hand side of the list, when you go to SSL Labs, it's got a sort of name and shame section. So do have a look at it from time to time and check your name hasn't turned up on that. It might be that you could use another free tool called If This Then That to set up an alert that if it pops up on that web page, you could get an alert behind the scenes that says you need to do something about it. It would certainly be much better for you to find out that there was a problem with your SSL front page before your customers do. Canary Tokens is something that we really like inside Secrutiny. So this is a solution that allows you to embed small bits of code into different resources, so into different documents or websites or images or servers. And what it does is, it's not going to stop a breach, right? But what it is going to do is tell you if some information has been taken, has been opened outside of where you're expecting it to be opened. It can give you a clue as to what's happened, and that's better than nothing for sure. But it can also be used as a mechanism for whether or not you've designed your access model internally correctly, or whether you've got mistakes in the configuration of cloud storage buckets, or SaaS solutions that have complex configurations that are difficult to manage. So using Canary Tokens, you can implement these little pieces of text, and those will fire back to a central point where you've registered and tell you that they've been opened. And it's good to put those in places where you don't expect people to normally be opening that information, and it just gives you a bit of a head start in terms of the instant response capability behind the scenes to do that. So there was a nice little graphic that just demonstrates the sorts of thing that it was describing. But I guess go and have a look, make of it what you will from your own perspective, and consider that as part of your information protection strategy. Okay, so atomic red team. We know that MITRE is really good for understanding attacks. We know that there is useful information associated to good detection that's available in MITRE with the MITRE Carrot framework. Once you've configured the right rules for your detection, and you've implemented those within your Zeem or system of record, and you've got your team prepped to respond to them, you need a way of testing some of those rules. And sometimes it can be a bit of a challenge to, if you don't want to design those tests yourselves, where can you easily find an opportunity to perform some of those tests? It's expensive sometimes to hire a red team to do that for you. And actually, you don't always want to run a full red team. You might just want to tease out one or two individual tests, micro tests, I would call them. And you might want to pick from a selection of those on a frequency basis that is suitable for your organization. Well, this is where the Atomic Red Team comes in. So this is a framework whereby you can test your environment, you can test and set off the right level of alerts that should make your Zeem alerting fire, and it should get your SOC ready to respond. Bearing in mind, all the different types of tests that you might want to run across the MITRE framework. So Atomic Red Team have put some real time into setting out a structure that means that you can run these tests either one at a time or as a group within a framework. And I would thoroughly recommend spending a bit of time to see if you can make use of that. I have to say this is my current favorite in terms of return value. I'm pretty sure that lots of organizations could benefit from it. Even if you're only looking at it for inspiration to say, have I got this set up to the right level of granularity to validate that my detection is working properly, that my detection, that the logging is working correctly at one end through to the other end of the pipeline, that my team are ready to respond to it. Maybe you've got some junior analysts, and you want to give them some semi-live fire exercises to bring them up to speed. So have a good look at that, and obviously feedback if you find it's useful. We have one also free tool that is available from Secrutiny. So this is not a sales pitch; it's a free tool. But it is something that we have found has been significantly useful in the last 6 months. And this is a scan of an area that is not commonly understood. And what I mean by that is within Microsoft 365, you've got the concept of each of those resources, so Exchange Online, Teams, SharePoint, Intune, Azure Active Directory, they're all linked behind the scenes to, within your tenant. And when you initiate a new team or a new team site, or if you have new people onboarding, there are linkages that join SharePoint together, that link Exchange Online and Teams, and Exchange Online and SharePoint, and that provides up to 60, 70,000 different configuration items within Microsoft 365. And not all of those configurations are visible within the user interface. Within Microsoft 365, it's just too granular and too deep. And so what we offer is a capability that allows you to examine some of those and see if there's been any evidence of an existing incident, but also where there might be significant configuration difficulties or gaps that would mean that you are more vulnerable to having your Microsoft 365 tenant compromised. So I've got a little video that I'm going to play in the background for this one, and then I'll move on to the next section. But if you wanted more information on that, please do send us an email at info@secrutiny.com, and we'll get that set up for you. So stand by.
How well do you know your organization's Microsoft 365 security posture? Do you know which M365 default settings leave your tenant vulnerable to cybersecurity threats? Or which of your users' 7,000 plus configuration settings need to change to keep your tenant safe? Secrutiny provides a free version of the M365 full scan called the M365 sample scan. This abbreviated version shows you the risk ratings for all M365 modules, including Exchange Online, Teams, SharePoint, and Azure Active Directory. Drilling down further, this sample scan also shows you more detail inside one risk parameter for each module. The Tenant Explorer view provides an interactive look into a single user's device and policy relationships. With this snapshot, you can see the scope of what an M365 full scan would cover. In a matter of minutes, this full scan reveals your current settings on an average of 140 security-related parameters. You can also see the number of low, medium, and high-risk settings for each M365 module based on Zero Trust architecture. Our scans help maintain the security of your tenant by being read-only. Your Microsoft Global Administrator runs each scan on your machine and never shares any credentials or network access with Secrutiny. You keep the results and use them to design your ideal remediation strategy. Find information here about your settings that no other tool on the market can uncover so quickly, all without requiring your global admin to manually run PowerShell commands. Our full scan reports even show the remediation progress you've made between scans. Try out our free M365 sample scan and see what you've been missing.
There you go. Shameless plug, it seems like. So slightly embarrassed, but hopefully you'll find that is of significant use anyway. We've certainly implemented this in a significant number of organisations over the past 6 months. And what we found is that there are many organizations that had implemented things in a hurry because of lockdown that needed some significant leg up in order to improve the M365 posture. But it's a free scan, right? And that's a genuine offer. Okay, so I guess that was the 10, but I couldn't run any list of tools that were free. You know, bearing in mind that it was aligned testing previously, I couldn't not mention uncoder.io. So this is something that is rather brilliant. What it means is that you can take any of your zine rules that might be in Splunk or ArcSight or QRadar or Azure Sentinel or Elasticsearch or Google Chronicle, and you can paste the source rule in for that, and it will rewrite just like Google Translate into any other zine tool that you've got. Now, recognizing that not everybody stays with the same zine for forever, this is something that is rather wonderful, and it's so simple and so brilliant. I couldn't not mention it. So if you've got some rules in your favorite zine, or you've worked somewhere else and then you wanted to implement that in somewhere where you're working new and they've got a completely different one, check out uncoder.io, because it is really outstanding. And it may not perfectly translate what you're doing, but it does a pretty good job, and it certainly gives you all the clues you need to finish that. So that brings me to the end of the different testing tools that we've lined up for you today. What we did say actually in the SASIG notification on LinkedIn was that there would be free intrusion detection systems described. And I don't want to disappoint. I only noticed that this morning, so apologies. But if you're looking for intrusion detection systems for low cost, the two components that I would recommend are Zeek and Suricata working together. So Zeek used to be called Bro, and that does the network monitoring part and analytics. And then Suricata allows you to take that information and make policy decisions, both in a north-south trajectory and also an east-west trajectory from an intrusion prevention system point of view. So I've added it in here because we promised it, and I didn't want to disappoint. And it is technically free, but what I would say is it comes with a bit of a caveat, and that is that whilst the software is free, you do need some significant compute to get that up and running. And depending on the network architecture and how that's built in different regions, it will require some mechanism to grab that data off the wire. So either a tap or a span, mirror port, if you don't mind the fact that that's sampled, or a packet broker. So if you happen to have packet brokers already, then draw an additional feed for that into Zeek and Suricata, and then you genuinely can make a solution for very low cost. But if you're having to buy the packet broker, I'm afraid there are very few free versions of that. So I just wanted to make that as a full disclosure and honor the promise that we made in LinkedIn. So what I then wanted to say was that we had a significant number of participants today. And while you've been listening to this, it may be that you've thought, well, actually, there was a tool that I used at one point that I would recommend to other people in the community. So what I wanted to do was give you the opportunity to come off mic, come onto chat, and perhaps be brave enough to give us a mention for a free tool that you would find or that you have found has been useful that other people in the community would enjoy. So on that basis, I'm going to turn the floor over to the participants, and let's see what it comes up with.
Yeah, Phil, thanks for that, and please add your thoughts to the chat or raise your hand, and you can come on live and in person this morning. There was one comment from Jane Martin earlier that I think is really important, is that quite often many of the basics are the findings that people are going to find from these really expensive pen tests or things that they're doing. So, you know, a lot of these tools, while they may not necessarily be full enterprise grade, can probably get you a lot of the items that you're going to find on a lot of those, you know, more expensive solutions.
Completely, yeah. It is. I think it's always worth supporting these organisations as well that are you know, creating the open source capability. I think lots and lots of the best technology on the internet, you know, since I've been, you know, since I left uni, I suppose, have always been community initiated, you know, and it's important that we recognise and continue to recognise the contribution that those organisations make, you know, and that we all stand to benefit from that.
Yeah, definitely. And I've got to say that the Atomic Red Team is just the coolest sounding name ever. So if you can say you're like a member of the Atomic Red Team, that just sounds, just the name alone
it knocks it out of the park, doesn't it? Yeah. You can see it as an album cover.
Absolutely.
It's like a band name.
Oh man, you called it. I can't take it now. But, well. Just one question while we're waiting for folks to jump in. I mean, what are the things that people should keep in mind before they start using these things? I mean, are there any kinds of legal requirements that they need to look into, or licensing traps or anything like that in some cases?
Generally speaking, the ones that I've shown today are all free for the purposes of, you know, that includes commercial use, you know. So the, you know, subject to the caveat I gave with the M365 scan that we're offering, you know, that is a one-off scan rather than something that you can keep doing again and again. So it is free, but it is also, you know, it's not something that is something that you can do repetitively. That there is a chargeable service behind that. And I think for a number of these, there, you know, the paid versions tend to give you more depth of capability rather than enable it, you know, from a legal or a commercial organization point of view. Almost all the ones that I included today, as far as I can remember, are those where it's perfectly okay to use them in, you know, in profit-making organizations as well as not-for-profit. And, you know, by all means, a vast majority of them have donation sort of stations set up on their websites, you know, and I've definitely done that before, where if I've genuinely made use of something that was free and open source, but inviting donations, that you know, discussed and agreed what an appropriate donation would be from the organization that I've been with, because the people have still got to eat, you know, and where it's a small organization, that is, you know, it seems only fair.
Yeah, and a question came in from Kevin Murphy on the chat, is where obviously using a lot of tools can get complicated, but if you had to pick one of the things you shared, which one would you say is the best place to start with? Oh,
there's a tricky one now. So if I stop sharing my screen, just for now, I'm going to dive back through. It very much depends on what part of security you're working in. You know, so I've danced across a number of different disciplines today. So we've talked about detection and response. So if your job is within a SOC, then I think you'd be better off looking at things like the Atomic Red Team, the Uncoder.io capabilities, and the Truno capabilities right from the beginning. If you were looking to get more into threat hunting, then I wouldn't necessarily start with the HELK framework. I would start with the book, you know, and do a bit of research on the side, and then get into building that environment. If you were, let's just have a look. The one that I would say gives you a great return on your investment is the OpenVAS and the Greenbone vulnerability management. So many organizations really struggle to build momentum in their vulnerability management disciplines and their functions, and actually it can be really difficult to have conversations internally with your developer teams, with your IT operations teams, with your security teams about how not every vulnerability that exists can be fixed with a patch. You know, and if you're looking to build, you know, if this is SASIG, we're talking about security awareness. If you're trying to build security awareness and build some momentum in your vulnerability management space, I think that the best return on your investment would be for using something like OpenVAS to literally put it in people's faces and say, this is what it's like this week. It was the same last month. It was the same the month before. If you don't make any changes, you know, this is going to cause us a problem. And you can generate a community of people in your organization who recognize and understand what it means to take some of that stuff seriously. And I think if we all fixed our vulnerabilities and used good passwords, you know, how much better place would we all be in, right? It still goes back to the basics.
Yeah, absolutely, and then also a great point from Matthew on the chat that Nessus is actually open free for charities. So I know that, you know, when you know, companies making things free for charitable organizations, that's a great point and something.
It's certainly worth asking. It's certainly worth asking. Lots of organizations I know will they won't advertise it, you know, explicitly on their website, but they often maintain a fund for organizations that can't, you know, that don't have the resources in order to purchase the full version, you know, and they'll often offer it at, you know, up to 90% or more off. You know, and it's not dissimilar to things like Adobe, where actually you might find that there are items in the Adobe suite that help you tell a better story with data from a security perspective, and that you can make use of that by, you know, if you're a non-profit or charity organization, by taking advantage of their licensing frameworks for that too.
Well, that's fantastic. And unless there's no more notes from the chat or anything, I really want to thank you, Phil, and thanks Scrutiny for this presentation today. And Joseph, any final words? Or
well, we've got an exit poll we always run. And if anyone's interested in that, the free scan Phil mentioned, we can use the second.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's come up for me. I'm going to say it now. There we go.
So if you do want that scan, then just put it in there, and we'll pass the details over to Phil. That's
brilliant. For whatever reason, it says hosts and panelists cannot vote. That would explain it. Yeah, I couldn't give myself a 5. Anyway, that's been fantastic. Folks, thank you very much. I really appreciate everyone's time for dialing in today. Craig, thank you so much for hosting and being great support.
Great, thank you all, and we'll see everybody, if not in the next couple of events, certainly back in the fall.
That's awesome.
Thanks so much.
Take care. Cheers, folks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.